Well, hello and welcome back to Midweek Mashup. Today I'm sitting down with Pastor Eric, who just spoke in our next iteration on the series of James.
Yep.
We had some interesting talks on Sunday about, what was the guy's name? The Liver King?
Liver King, yeah.
Influencers and words that don't mean what people think they mean.
Yes, that's good.
Reminds me of that clip from The Princess Bride.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, you want to tell us a little bit about what we discussed on Sunday?
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I didn't start out to write the sermon with this in mind, but so much of James is so straightforward. There's no mystery. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to go, oh, what does this mean in the Greek? Because the Greek is clear. Mm-hmm. And Pastor Ty was talking about this when he preached on James 3. He's like, there's just not a lot of sermon to write. Like, he says what he says, and it kind of means what it means. And so, our responsibility is to listen and then do it, right? Mm-hmm. But I really appreciated that about that sermon. Is don't overcomplicate it, right? James 4 is a weirder one because it has a couple puzzling verses, if you're reading through it on your Bible app or in the thing, there's footnotes, and it's like the sentence could be written this way, or it could be written this way, or some people, some translations and manuscripts have the capital S in Spirit, and some don't. So we don't know if it's the Holy Spirit or if there's this human spirit. We don't really know, right? So it was a little tricky. So it made me go, okay, well, this is a good opportunity to just hey, let's remember some Bible reading tricks and tips so that we can, when we take a deeper dive, we can get a little more meaning out of it and make sure we don't, because I think the thing that I was emphasizing is let's not read ourselves or our ideas or our culture into the text until we've read it in its original context. And, one of the things that happens in American Christianity is the individualization of the text, and it's all about my personal sins, or in this case know or pleasures, which get usually twisted up into something sexual or related to I don't know, food or whatever, kind of simple animalistic desires and pleasures, right?
Which it could be, but it's not.
It could be
not exclusively.
It could be, and in other texts it is.
Yeah.
But in James it's not, right. And that's the piece that we have to make sure that we don't. When Paul is talking about those things, this is what he means. Right. But James is actually talking about something different here, and he's talking about people who will purposely cause division, purposely, kind of mess up the vibes in the community because they've got an agenda, and they've got desires, and their desires are power, money, influence. They want to be important or whatever. And so they're teachers or leaders with bad motives, and they're messing up the community. And that's what he's been talking about since at least the beginning of chapter 3, right? And I think that's so important for us to hear, because we could read that and go, oh yeah, I should really curb my desires, and I should really, and that's true. And again, other scriptures talk about that, but I don't want to miss the fact that we're surrounded by leaders and teachers who have agendas, right? Influencers who are selling us something, politicians who have agendas that, no matter what they seem to be selling you, are probably not in your best interest, because in the end, what gets played out doesn't seem like they actually care about you or the things that you care about at all. And you're like, why do we keep doing this? And so I think it's really important for us to pause and to, one, make sure we're reading what the text is actually saying, not what we think it says, to really dig deep and get into the original context. That always helps us then apply that to our context. But two, that's an important message. There are a million messages coming at you every day, and it's usually somebody has an agenda that's for their interest, and your interest, if it happens to coincide with theirs, cool, and if it doesn't, they don't care, right? And we just need to be honest about that. I'll speak directly to the camera on this. You may have a YouTube preacher that you love. A person doesn't know you. They're not coming to visit you in the hospital if you get sick. And even if what they're teaching is good, like it needs to be contextualized for your life, and they don't know anything about your life. And so that doesn't say like turn all of that off. It's just, like I think it's important that we really are careful about who we let speak into our lives. And there are people who will speak into your lives and actually have something great to say, even though at best they can give you some general wisdom, but they can't speak into your exact circumstances. And so that's why it's important to have wise counsel, people right? But also, like, man, I see so much of this stuff that people are posting on the internet that's supposed to be inspirational, and I'm like, one, that's mostly meaningless. Like it's a feel good, makes me feel good about myself, but it doesn't actually like change my circumstances, And it works because people are looking for hope, and any just like boost of like self-esteem or hope that you can get can maybe get you through the day, and that's good, but it doesn't actually do anything about your circumstances. It doesn't change reality, right? But a lot of times, man, I see these people that have an agenda, and it doesn't really align always with Jesus's agenda, and can be a big distraction from that. And so all that to say, be careful. I'm not telling you to not go on the internet anymore, but half of us probably shouldn't. And it wouldn't be the worst thing if the internet just got unplugged. And I'm not telling you to not like find things that are of interest to you or you find helpful, but just be careful, be wise. Jesus told us to be gentle as doves and shrewd as serpents, and this is one of the things he's talking about. Watch out for the wolves in sheep's clothing. They may say something that sounds good or aligns with something you agree with over here, but what's their motivation? What are they really after? And what impact do they actually have on you? Has this person actually enriched your life through the things that they've said? And my main point for this Sunday is James has already kind of given his thesis that if you're upholding the righteous law of loving your neighbor, the royal law, he calls it, of loving your neighbor, then you are doing right, right? Then you are being righteous. And so for the audience on Sunday, for anybody watching this, I think that should be the litmus test for everything. Does this thing I'm listening to, does this podcast I'm listening to, this YouTube video I'm watching, does it contribute to me becoming more loving of my neighbor? Or is it actually contributing to me making enemies and seeing enemies everywhere I look? One is from Jesus. One isn't. And this isn't me living in some hippie utopia mindset. There are people who will prop themselves up as enemies against you. There are people who will make you their enemy. But in Jesus's, teachings, we're called to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. And so that doesn't mean like, well, this person hates me, so now I get to hate them. No, we have to do the hard work of figuring out, how do I love this person? Even if I have to protect myself from this person because they mean me harm, I don't get to just simmer in hate and allow them to be my enemy. And so I think that's a really tough teaching. And some people just can't go there. They won't go there. And as I always say, if you've been in an abusive situation, loving your enemies doesn't mean staying in abusive situations. It doesn't mean that you have to continue to take that. In fact, I'd say get out of there. Get some help. Call the church. We can help you. Call some authority, whatever. Get out of that situation. But also don't let them control you after that by seething in hatred. That's one of the things that I think we miss. That when Jesus tells us to forgive, it's not just about setting the other person free. It's about setting ourselves free. I know I'm like rambling here. I've gone all over the map. But I think this is like the human emotion that we deal with. Like people do and say things that harm us or that we really strongly disagree with, and it's so easy to let them control us because we're obsessed with holding on to that anger or that wrath or the sense of being right. And in the process, it's so funny that we've actually given our power over to them. They're now, whether they know it or not, they are now in control of our thoughts. We've given them too much influence into our lives. And so when we talk about loving our neighbor, it's not just about, this happy feel-goodery. It's about, hey, like, we got to get to a point where we can't allow people to control us with our hatred, with our anger. We've got to, set them free because Jesus is a forgiver, right? but we need to set ourselves free and not let people who have harmed us control us by holding on to bitterness and anger. We got to let that go, So that's not even anything that was in my sermon, but it's all related to that idea of like, we are called to love our neighbor. Our neighbors are not always easily lovable. And so that's the hard work is on us, is to figure out what that looks like and pursue it. And the last thing I'll say about, my message on Sunday is, it's an election year. And for some reason, the way we do politics now is just who can have the deepest burn on the other person or party. And it's a bunch of like middle school boys is what our politics sound like. And instead of Christians holding our politicians to account, calling them to a higher standard, many of us have participated in that and have made a mockery out of the way of Jesus because we're not living out that idea of loving your enemy. And we've seen our neighbor who maybe disagrees with us politically or would vote differently than we would, and now they're our enemies. I don't know, man. For Jesus to say love your enemy in the culture that he was in, a people who were occupied by the Roman Empire, if he had the audacity to say that in that context, I don't think it's crazy for us to love our neighbors in our context. Anyway, I won't get too deep into that, but I think the teaching stands for today. I think we're called to love our neighbor, or even those we perceive as enemies, and the way that we talk as Christians politically. Man, we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard. I'm involved. I'm engaged. I vote. All of that stuff. I pay attention to what's going on. I'm not saying be Amish. Don't engage. But how we engage is so important, and it can be bridge building. It can be healing. It can be reconciling, or it could be part of the enemy making machine. And if it is, it's not the way of Jesus. And so maybe we need to sit a few plays out and just shut up for a little bit.
Well, by the time this video comes out, we will have also concluded with our James series on James 5. Can you tell us a little bit about what's kind of, at this point, coming up, but what people would have just heard?
James 5 is, he does that thing that I think a lot of writers do when they're like, I got to finish this thing and get it out, and so he bounces around. Like, he's pretty consistently on theme for most of the book, and then there's a couple spots where it's like a more of an abrupt subject change. And the first one comes at the end of chapter 4, and I didn't preach on it because I think it belongs more in chapter 5, because he kind of makes this switch from talking to teachers to talking to wealthy people, specifically like wealthy merchants, and the reason that it's pretty obvious that he's switched who he's talking to is because they're talking about setting up shop in a new place, and the end goal is make money. So it's like that classic meme. Step 1, this. Step 2, ? Step 3, profit, right? And that's their whole thing is they're scheming. How are we going to get richer, right? And we know they're the wealthy merchant class because most people don't have any disposable income. And so to be able to go set up another business in a new place is not, a reality for most people that would be receiving this letter. And essentially he's just basically saying, like, don't compromise your soul for money. Don't, like, you make all these plans and your primary motivation now has become enriching yourself. And in the process, not only are you ignoring the Lord because you've essentially said, I'm in control, and you've made all these plans without consulting the Lord. But also then he goes on in chapter 5 to say, like, you're oppressing the poor. This is exactly what the prophets have always preached against. God has always called his people unfaithful when they worship false gods and when they oppress the poor for their own gain, right? So it's on theme with much of the scriptures. And then let me pull out the end, because there's a couple things I want to get to, but I want to make sure I get the wording right, because it's pretty interesting. It's a little different than other passages of Scripture.
Why are you pulling up Twitter?
Yeah. He kind of, in the first chapter of the book, he deals with, wealthy oppression, and he deals with perseverance for those who are being oppressed, which is the majority of the recipients of the letter, right? And then he has this prayer of faith that I love so much, and this is a lot of what I'm going to spend my time on Sunday. And I won't go through it all, but I think it's so beautiful because the idea of praying in faith is a communal prayer, and I think that's so good. It's such a important correction for the kind of hyper individualistic Christianity that we're usually exposed to, or at least I was exposed to for much of my faith journey. That it's about you and Jesus and getting into heaven someday, and you don't see any of that in the book of James. He's not concerned with that at all. He's concerned with the people of faith living out the words of Jesus in a way that honors God and shows people the good news, right? And so he has this prayer of faith, and it's all about, hey, is someone among you in trouble? Let them pray. If is anyone happy, let them sing songs of praise. Is anyone sick? Let them call the elders of the church to pray over them and anoint them with oil. This isn't about a one-on-one relationship with God, though that's important. It's about, in this community, here's how, like, whatever circumstance somebody's going through, we're going to walk with them through it. We're going to pray for their healing. We're going to rejoice when they rejoice. And I think that's so good for us to be reminded that, like, yes, have your personal relationship with Jesus, study the scriptures on your own, have a robust prayer life, but if it's not also a part of a communal Christian life, it's going to lack maturity, and it'll only go so far. And so I think it's just a great reminder for us, a challenge, a call for us to make sure that we as Christians and we as FCC are creating spaces for that to happen, that we're available for prayer, that we celebrate the things that are happening in people's lives. And it's not just about me, it's about we. And so I'm kind of excited to end on that because, one, James is pretty heavy, and a lot of times you feel like you're in the principal's office. You know what I mean? And as someone who spent a lot of time in the principal's office, when I read James, I'm like, man, I'm in trouble again. It wasn't even me this time. I was never guilty in my mind, but he knows this audience, right? And so he's got sibling type of relationship with these audience. He's not just some authority figure yelling at them. He's saying, hey, we talked about this. Like, let's get back on track, right? But he ends with this proactive. All these things are that we've talked about up to this point are ways in which communities get dysfunctional, broken up, divisive. But here are the ways that we're going to proactively build health into our communal life together. And when we commit to these things, then we will thrive. And so I love that the book ends that way. It's always nice when the book ends with something that's like, I know what I'm supposed to do next, and I feel good about my ability to do that. If he just ended with, stop being jerks, so you rich people, we'd be like, oh, okay, that hurt. But instead it's like, hey, let me correct these things, but I'm not just telling you what not to do. Let me replace that. Here's what you should be doing. And it's such good teaching for us today.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down for a little extended midweek mashup to cover the end of James. Yeah. If you are interested in hearing more from Pastor Eric, we'll go ahead and add some banners to his messages for James 4 and James 5. And if you want to interact with the rest of the series, we have some more content for you right here.